Yo, what's up, Hoophead Nation? This is Eddie Aparicio and my co-host Anthony Toine Corral. And I got to tell you, man, this was a crazy trade season that just happened. The trade deadline just happened, and it was predominantly dominated by the Giannis. Where's Giannis going, right? And then also, Ja Morant. Those are the two biggest stars, that were, kind of hinted at getting traded, right? And then there were some kind of trades that happened we didn't even see coming, right? So Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? The Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis decided to go ahead and part ways, right? They went ahead and decided that, Giannis was going to be a good guy. He wanted to stay, in Milwaukee for his career. He didn't demand any trades. He didn't like the way things were kind of developing with the team construction. Milwaukee Bucks decided, okay, we're going to go ahead and honor your request, and then we're going to go ahead and canvass the market. So this is essentially, I think, what happened is that
that's what the
canvassing.
media was telling us, Eddie. That's what the media was telling us. Let's be clear.
You mean that the Bucks were canvassing the market?
The media was telling us that Giannis wanted off the team, that the Bucks were taking offers. All of that.
Gotcha.
The media.
I gotcha.
Is
I
what
gotcha.
I'm
I got
headed. I'm headed somewhere here in a minute, but
No worries. So I wanted to go ahead and start with the Giannis talk because that dominated the airwaves and, for the whole period of time, because there were many suitors going after them after the Bucks, trying to make a trade with the Bucks. And the
correct.
Warriors were kind of considered the lead candidate to land him because they had the most picks to offer and some young talent, probably not the young talent that they were targeting. Minnesota was one of the lead candidates as well because Anthony Edwards is somebody that Giannis wants to team up with. Then you also have
And that the media says, right? How about all this?
there's a lot of smoke and mirrors anytime you have
a lot of
trade, right?
Yep.
Some of this is designed to get some reaction from other teams, right?
Yep.
So that's a possible. So anyway, so Giannis dominated the airwaves. Lo and behold, Giannis didn't get moved, and then you kind of see what was the real story, bro. So I want to get your take. I want to start with Giannis. We'll go into Ja Morant, because those are the two big names that were noted, and then we're going to go ahead and cover the way I kind of did this. There's 22 trades, by the way. There were 22 trades. There were about 5 of them that were headlines, about 6 of them that were kind of like sneaky, and then there's a bunch of them that were just noise. About 11 of them that were just noise. Not necessarily going to cover every trade, but we're going to cover the ones that I think are most noteworthy, and I want to get your take on some of those trades that are noteworthy. So I want to before we get into that, I want to go ahead and get your take on what Giannis, what happened here. You're talking about the media steered us.
So there's two things I want to point to. One was I don't know if it was Twitter or a social media post where it's from the Bucks and it's a little happy face kind of yawning, covering like they're bored, you know. So you take that one.
Right.
So what does that mean? So the way I interpret that is you guys are all making offers. This is boring me. We're not entertaining any of this. That's and then number 2, after the deadline, Giannis posted a clip that a lot of people have posted from the Wolf of Wall Street where
Going anywhere.
Yeah, not going anywhere. And with a little quote that said, this is me trying to remember the quote, something like leaders don't follow, they attract, or something along those lines.
Yes.
So I'm like thinking in my head, honestly, I'm like, well, this is bullshit. Why didn't you just say this 3 weeks ago? Why are you waiting to now? And why is all of this, why are we going through all these hoops? Now, as a Warriors fan, obviously I got a little more emotion into this because we were potentially one of the people that could land him. But I'm like, if you knew you weren't going anywhere, and if you want to attract talent as opposed to going somewhere their talent already exists, then why didn't you just let everybody know? Why do you wait till after the deadline is over to say these types of things? And furthermore, if you do go somewhere, well, it better be somewhere that has no talent. It better not be a team with Ant-Man or Steph or, Luka or, any of these players, because then you're just following, right? You're not attracted. So I don't really understand that, because that's really one of the few times that they actually appears to come from their mouths or their accounts. So I'm like, man, this is just kind of bull. So was this all a dog and pony show?
Totally was. And it makes it so, you can kind of argue both ways. You can pretty much say that Giannis is potentially being disingenuous, right? Because, he maybe did say that he wanted to trade, but he's a good guy and doesn't want to portray himself to be a guy that's demanding stuff. He wants to stay with one organization for his entire career. And, I think that's important to him and he likes Milwaukee and so forth. But we all know that the Milwaukee Bucks are continuing to slide in the rankings. They
Yep.
don't have much talent around Giannis. And Giannis wants to win. And he's 31 years old. He's in the prime of his career and he
Yes.
wants to win. And
Yes.
he's given the Milwaukee Bucks the chance to build something around him. And it hasn't happened. So
Correct.
he's losing patience. So you can say one argument is Milwaukee wants to kind of canvas to see what kind of market there is. And that's what they took advantage of during this trade deadline process is they kind of wanted to gauge what kind of offers can we really get? Because we really don't have to do anything until really the off season, right?
Yep. Yep.
The thing is that there is a danger in doing it this way because if Giannis really wants to go, and yet the Milwaukee Bucks want to go ahead and keep him, then there's a conflict of interest there. And then there's also that the Milwaukee Bucks want to go ahead and potentially tank to get better picks and so forth for the upcoming draft, right? So
Yep.
there's an argument that they might shut down Giannis Antetokounmpo, even though he wants to play, and that wouldn't go well, right? So that's what there's a lot of conflicting stuff here. So
There is, but Eddie, here's the thing, right? So when you look at dynasties of the Chicago Bulls, the San Antonio Spurs, the Golden State Warriors, the Lakers,
so
they were built on a core of players, right? The Spurs were Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker.
Robinson, Parker, yeah,
Yeah,
it's actually those three initially. Yeah,
the Bulls were Scotty, Michael, and then a Grant or a Rodman, right? They had a core. The Warriors were Draymond, Clay, and Steph.
yeah.
The Lakers were Shaq and Kobe, and some kind of moving piece. Where is the core from the Milwaukee Bucks from when they won their championship? It's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah, they're gone. And if they're old and they can't, but it's almost as if Giannis's career is going backwards. He started with a core. Now it's just him and they try to build. You know how hard it is to build? I mean, I could argue that today, Steph is every bit as productive as Giannis is on the court. Yet we can't build anything around him because the core is falling apart.
Right.
There's
One
nothing
person
there.
alone can't do it.
So Giannis, the shortcut to that is to team up with the talent, team up with someone, which contradicts his statement altogether. Because whether he goes to Minnesota or Ant-Man goes to Milwaukee, yeah, sure, one is they're following him and the other one is he's following them. But that's your only avenue. And for you to think that you're going to sway a whole organization by attracting talent, you attracted Damian Lillard. That didn't work. You got Miles Turner. That didn't work. You got, and so none of this is working. So I don't know collectively what Milwaukee and Antetokounmpo are thinking in terms of how to build this. Because it is very, very hard when you have just Jordan couldn't win by himself. He needed Pippen. He never, you need other pieces and they don't have those other pieces. And the way the salary cap is and the way they're paying players, they may never get another piece. Even if they get a young player, it's going to take time for that player to develop. So the only way Giannis is going to succeed is either by taking on a bunch of talent, or going somewhere that the talent's already there.
Problem here, though, is that Milwaukee isn't a destination that free agents
Correct.
want to go to.
Correct.
So, but Giannis is definitely a player that he's beloved in the association. He's beloved worldwide. He's beloved
Yep.
by the fans, right? So
Yep.
he's a good guy. And he's really talented. And so, but that in itself hasn't proven to be enough to attract talent to go to Milwaukee. Is it a function of him, or is it a function of the organization? Or maybe a combination of the two. But he has given a lot of time for this organization to do something and build. And I'm not saying they didn't try; they've tried. So I think his patience has run out. He doesn't want to convey that he was the guy that was behind this thing, which is why you can kind of say that this whole Wolf of Wall Street thing, the clip is disingenuous because, he's kind of hiding behind something that he really probably started from the outset, right?
Yeah. And it's really hard to win at all. I mean, Oklahoma is probably the favorite for now and for the next couple of years. Based in, I'll get to sneaky trades on that one because there was a sneaky trade there going to Oklahoma. But
Yep.
they got a core. They got a core of players. Shea couldn't do it by himself, and so to me, I don't know how Giannis. If we go by what Giannis said and says that I'm going to attract people, I don't know how he wins that way. I just don't. I don't care if he's in the only team that I think there's only two teams that I think he could pull off that mentality with, and that's the Lakers and maybe the Celtics, just because of brand recognition. People will come there because they are the Lakers and because they are the Celtics, right? But outside of those two teams,
You could argue the Warriors though too. You could still argue the Warriors.
I think that's slowly slipping away.
It's slowly slipping. You could argue that they're they're
Correct.
still have the panache right now because they have Steph Curry, right?
Correct.
Steph Curry is one of these players that is very attractive for people to want to play with because he opens up the floor for a lot of people to do what they want to do. He is a vortex for the defense, right? So that helps in getting players here, and he's got a great reputation with other players. The only problem is if that this player who's coming over has a bit of ego, which all NBA players have egos. That's why it worked with Clay, is because Clay swallowed his pride, swallowed his ego, and let Steph be Steph. And Clay showed out when he wanted to, when he could. But it's tough to play in the shadow of a Steph Curry.
But I will give you one further. Steph swallowed his ego when they got Durant. He gave the team to Durant.
He did, but Durant still felt the shadow of his presence because he wanted to be the guy, and he was never going to be the guy.
Yeah,
he was never going to be the guy, man. In the fans' eyes, he was never going to be the guy.
No,
he had the talent to be the guy, and he won 2 MVPs with Curry on the team. But that's because Curry deferred for the most part to him.
Yeah.
He was the bigger matchup problem. Curry was the guy who allowed him to be who he is.
Which only in turn made Curry more lovable.
Absolutely. But in the end, when Durant left, it had to do a lot. I mean, Draymond had some influence on that, right? Let's face it. The organization, how they handled that whole Draymond, with Durant and Draymond, you could kind of say that was the genesis of them creating a monster, right? In Green, right? But that was probably a small fraction of why he left. The other part of why he left is because he wanted to be the guy, and he has a lot of ego. He wants to be the guy, and he was the guy. He won 2 championships really because of him, but then he didn't get the love and adoration that Steph Curry has, and that's what I think he wanted. That's why he left again, in my opinion. That's why he left to go to Brooklyn and be the guy there with a couple of his buddies, and he knows he's probably the best of those 3 in his mind. But that didn't work.
No, and I will say something, Eddie, and that is I think Giannis is a good guy, but there's a difference between being a good guy and a stand-up guy. And right now, Giannis is not being a stand-up guy. Like, say what you're thinking, bro. Like, you don't have to be a jerk about it, but if you want
it's a little passive aggressive is what
yeah. Just don't be all, I don't know, behind the doors, you're trying to manipulate or do whatever it is you're trying to do. He easily could have been a stand-up guy when this all started and said, I'm not leaving Milwaukee, But, and that's another thing too, Eddie. I feel that if he really wanted to go to Minnesota, Golden State, Miami, or New York, which were the 4 teams, he could have made it happen. He could have said, I'm not resigning here. I want to go there. And if you don't send me there, I will go there in 2 years and you'll get nothing. He had that leverage, but clearly he didn't want to go. That's my interpretation of the situation. And if I'm Milwaukee, I don't necessarily blame them for not taking those offers, because in my opinion, there was nothing really there worth taking.
Yes. So this dovetails into something that is kind of off script, because I wanted to kind of go a different direction, after the Giannis talk. But we're talking about a good guy of the NBA, a guy that actually could have asserted himself to make something happen, right?
Correct.
If they teamed up Curry and Giannis together, we talked about this in past podcasts, that the valuation of the Warriors would go through the roof.
Correct.
2 of the good guys of the NBA. I would say that there's similar personality in some senses too, because they don't want to assert themselves too hard to make an organization do something, right?
Yeah.
Now, with this whole Giannis thing not happening for the Warriors, now when Jimmy Butler went down, with the ACL hurt around Warriors world, like you pointed
Yeah.
out, that changed the complete direction of this organization.
Correct.
We know what happened with the Warriors. They got Kristaps Porzingis, which is a consolation prize for not getting Giannis. They also
Yeah.
made a couple other deals. Trace Jackson Davis, Buddy Hield went along with Kristaps Porzingis. Then the argument here is, okay, if what's going to happen now with Curry? He doesn't have much time left. He's going to
No.
be 38 next month.
Yep.
And is he going to be the guy that's going to force the Warriors to do something that nobody here in Warriors land wants to do, and that's potentially trade him to another organization so that he can chase that fifth ring that he wants. And there's a part of him, I think, that probably is considering that, but it's really, really important for him to retire play for his entire career for one organization.
Yes.
And he did build, it's that the house that was built by Steph is Chase organization, right? That was because of him. His valuation is incredible for this organization.
Of course.
He definitely waited it out, when, they didn't, early in his career, it was a process to get to where we're at right now. He could have easily left, but decided to stay. And that's admirable. But now we're at this point in this organization's history that we know that they're likely going to start not necessarily playing as hard as they can right now, because we don't know how much Kristaps Porzingis is going to play. We know they've already lost a couple players. We know that Draymond Green, Al Horford, they're all old and they have to load manage these guys. And how hard do they really want to push Curry to continue trying to go as high as the 8th or 7th seed? And they know he has a knee issue. So this now forces an interesting offseason that's coming up. You got Jimmy Butler coming back, but then, is Kristaps Porzingis enough? We don't know how he's going to play. So now there's the reason I'm bringing this up is because we argued that Giannis could have really asserted himself to make something happen. And we could say the same thing in this case for Curry, that he can force his hand here to go out and go to somewhere else.
Correct. So I think one of the main differences between Giannis and Curry is I think the Milwaukee Bucks sees Giannis as a person that can still win them a championship. Okay. And I think the Golden State Warriors look at Curry and they see a player they're indebted to. I think that's a very different perspective. Now, I'm a believer, how would I put this? Curry makes a lot of money.
Yes.
As far as I know, his checks don't bounce. And, I'm kind of going to go old school here. You're owed a paycheck every month or every week or every whatever they pay him. That's what you're owed. You're not owed more than that, So I've never signed up with the fact that the Warriors owe Curry anything, because they don't. He's won 4 championships, which, as far as I know, LeBron's the only one that's currently playing that even equals that. So he's got more than everybody else other than LeBron. Right now, what I look at it is, how do the Warriors as an organization take the most advantage of a player that is championship caliber? What can you do to continue that streak? They owe it to themselves. They don't owe it to Curry. I never felt that they owed it to Curry, right? So to me, when you talk about Curry, yes, he can opt, but here's the thing, right? When you're making $58 to $60 million a year and you're eating, at this point, 50% of the salary cap?
Yes.
Like, how realistic do you expect them to be able to build around?
Build something.
That's just not, and I don't blame him. He's earned that money. I mean, absolutely pay the man. But you can't have it both ways. You can't take 50% of the salary cap and then think that you can bring someone on and do this. That's number one. And then number two, in reality, and this is for maybe another day, the Warriors have really done a really poor job of drafting. They've done a really poor job of drafting. That's the one thing that this Kuminga trade has pretty much highlighted. They pretty much have nothing to show for the players that they've drafted.
Yes, I agree with
and I don't know if that's, and we can get into a discussion whether that's development. They don't know how to develop players, whether they're drafting those,
I think
what they're, yeah.
Yes.
Correct. So we can go into a bunch of conversations on why that's happened, but they've drafted really poorly. And the truth is that all of this lands on Bob Myers' head, because he's the one that drafted all these players. This is not a Mike Dunleavy thing. This is a Bob Myers thing, and going back to the creation of a monster, right, with Draymond, that also lies on Bob Myers, right? He's the one that didn't toe that line, for whatever reason. Maybe Joe Lacob told him to back off. I don't know. But for whatever reason, they created that monster, which is yet another hurdle to being able to attract players here. You know, where,
Yes.
where I think Draymond can be viewed as a negative. I don't know if he is, but it's possible.
Yeah, you could be viewed. I mean, this organization, as successful as it's been, we're talking about the Warriors organization, be as successful as it's been, there is a dysfunction that is perceived in the, around, the association by other players, that the way they handle the whole Draymond situation is kind of telling on, kind of like the way the organization runs things. They kind of, a strong personality like a Draymond Green can essentially, create, the rule set that everybody abides by. And that's kind of screams dysfunction. And that probably might turn off some, players to come over here, right? That was the old regime. We don't know how Dunleavy, he hasn't been doing it long enough to be able, and really, he's not really the guy that is really running the show. It's really Joe Lacob, right? So Joe Lacob, it could be him that created this monster. And he didn't want to, but Lacob doesn't seem that he's an East Coast guy. He doesn't seem to be the type of guy that would just kind of let this thing kind of slide. Whereas, Bob Myers is more of a California guy, and that's kind of more California-like, right?
And Eddie, before we had our podcast, obviously you and I have been talking like this for years. So
Right.
this is just an extension of that. But I don't know if you recall a comment that I said. When they lost Jerry West, they lost the room that was challenging everybody else in that. And
Yes.
so you can almost go back to the loss because, Lacob wanted to trade Clay for Kevin Love.
Yes. Yes.
Jerry West is like, you're on crack. You're not doing it. Jerry West was the one voice in the room that would be like, no. And once he left, I don't want to give him all the credit. I think, he did some talent, but I think what he felt, he was very confident about, and he was able to sway the room in a way where everyone's like, okay, I think that makes sense. And that voice was lost when he left the organization, and that's to me where things started to kind of
Waver a little bit. It kind of wavered.
Start to erode, not on a quick level, but slowly start to erode,
Yes.
I'm curious, when Draymond went off the deep end, how would Jerry West have handled that? Would he have given him the boot? Would he have, because really Draymond didn't start all that stuff until kind of Jerry West was starting to be out of the picture, and so
Jerry West and David West.
Correct. And David
When
West.
West left, that's when all hell
Yeah, that's true. So,
and Draymond Green was not, because he actually was brought on the team to contain him.
Yeah.
Man. So
yeah.
Anyway, bro, I know we talked a lot about this, and again, for the audience, we kind of don't do this. We don't follow a script. We kind of wherever the conversation goes, it's more natural, it's more genuine, it's more authentic. That way, we don't rehearse anything. We just whatever happens in a conversation. Like Toine was saying, we have been doing this for years over lunch, trying to do this on a podcast, right? And I think hopefully you guys enjoy the banter. We're not the argumentative type that we're going to kind of cut each other off and this and that. A lot of radio shows do that. We're genuine friends. We've known each other since we were 16 years old. Believe it or not, that's 40 years, bro. We've known each other for 40 years.
You're aging us, but yes.
Right? But dude, we look good. We look good for our age, bro. Come on.
I got my Santa Claus going here.
Yeah, but dude, you got the freaking look at the hair, man. It's like the locks are just freaking unbelievable, man. You got unbelievable. Anyway, but so we kind of definitely went off course, on how I wanted to kind of do this, but I think that the way this conversation flowed was, genuine, right? I think it's just, just kind of the way it flowed. So, we spent a lot of time on Giannis. Real quick, before we get into all the trades, Ja Morant didn't get traded.
No.
And we thought Ja Morant would more than likely, because we went through this process, a couple of podcasts ago where, Miami Heat were kind of the Kings. He was being linked to multiple teams, and, the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I thought that would be a great destination because they really don't have a point guard, right? So but lo and behold, even when Jaren Jackson getting traded, and we'll talk about that, Ja Morant we thought was on the move. And I thought that was very interesting that he didn't get moved. Let me ask you this. Is that more of a function of the market for Ja Morant is not that good? Or is it because the Memphis Grizzlies think that Ja Morant can be unleashed and become the force that they think he is and change the ways about him? What do you think? What do you think is the reason?
No, I think it's the former. I think his value was so low. They even mentioned that Memphis had dropped their asking price for Ja. and still nobody stepped up. Now, I think for teams like Sacramento, the Brooklyn Nets, some of these basement dwellers, I think they missed an opportunity. I think that they should have took it. But when you're a team that is on the rise or are a few players away, it's really because Ja Morant's an A-type personality. He's going to come in and he may not be the best player on the team, but he's going to behave and act and play like he's the best player on the team. And when you do that on a team that's on the rise, that can be very disruptive. You don't know how to interpret that. So that immediately takes out a bunch of teams, that are risky, that aren't willing to risk that chemistry imbalance. But for me, if I'm, and maybe they didn't want, Malik Monk and DeMar DeRozan maybe that's all the Kings were willing to offer, because like if I'm an organization, I'm not giving up a first round pick for Ja. He's too risky. It's been 2 or 3 years since either he's been hurt or he's been suspended due to his behavior. That's too risky, dude. I'm not giving up a first round for him. And maybe that was Memphis's low ball. Like, you got to give us at least one first round pick, And I was hearing this show that they were saying that there was talk that maybe Memphis was considering giving up a pick for you to take Ja.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a first round pick. I'm not trying to say that, but giving up a second round pick and give us whatever, just to get out from under that contract, because he's got a big contract.
Right.
And even then, if that's true, still there were no takers.
It's incredible, man, how much with the amount of talent that guy has.
Yeah.
It does matter how you carry yourself, in the NBA, right? I mean, that matters a lot. And, he's definitely one of these alpha personality types who definitely wants to, take charge. His talent, he's always been that guy growing up that he jumps out of a gym. I mean, he's probably got the most highest vertical leap NBA. He's incredible, like the athleticism that guy has. And, he's got great dribbling ability. He can shoot okay. His defense is somewhat suspect just because he's a smaller guy, but the athleticism that he has is through the roof. And even with all of that, he's still not marketable at the trade deadline. That's very interesting. So that goes to show you, kids that are listening, or fathers that have kids, that are playing basketball, that character matters. Character matters.
There's so much that goes into being a champion. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Eddie. You're going to be better at this remembering. I don't think Memphis has ever even reached the Western Conference Finals.
No.
I meant with Ja. The saying is, what are you paying for then, Eddie? For a guy that gets you eliminated first or second round?
Yeah, but you could argue that it's not really all him either. Although the team that the Memphis Grizzlies had, with Taylor Jenkins when he was the coach, had a very interesting squad that wreaked a lot of havoc against the Warriors. And it just took a Warrior team that had a lot of playoff experience to be able to overcome that, because that team was on the rise. And you could argue that if they had beaten the Warriors and gone past the Warriors, we could easily be talking a totally different story right now, with Ja Morant potentially having won a championship, potentially, right? But that's very interesting that he just didn't get traded. And it's interesting that the market for him softened up, right? So anyway, bro. So, okay, let's get into the trades. We spend a lot of time on Ja and so, we went through, so there's 22 trades that happened, bro. 22 of them. Okay. But the headline trades, and the reason why I'm bringing up the headline, because these are the big names that got traded. We all thought Giannis and Ja would be the guys that, the big headline trades. But then the one that kind of came out of nowhere, the first one, they were like, what? Jaren Jackson getting traded, Memphis Grizzlies to the Utah Jazz. Memphis Grizzlies gave up Jaren Jackson, Jock Landale, John Conchar, Vince Williams, all of these guys. And, Memphis receives Walter Clayton, Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, Georges Niang, and 3 future first-round picks. Now, that was a very surprising. More than likely, yes, but I didn't. Yes, but still, holy crap! No, and when he was moved, I'm like, oh my god, this has got to be the signal that Ja Morant's being moved, because this tells you that they're blowing this thing up. Memphis is blowing this up, and and so you might be right that the market for Ja essentially got softened. Because he's a very talented player, but we all know the character is kind of questionable. But dude, this one was the one that I thought was like, holy Moses, what is going on? The Danny Ainge, who's got this, this reputation for just fleecing guys. I mean, 3 first-round picks for Jaren Jackson. Woo, man, that's a lot. But hey, Jaren Jackson's a hell of a player, and the Warriors were also tied to him as well. But they spent so much time on trying to put a package for Giannis that they kind of lost, they kind of lost sight a little bit, right? That could have gone this and pivoted to this guy because he was somebody that they had their eyes on as well. So that was the first one. Wanted to get your thoughts on that trade, bro.
So big picture
Yes.
for the Warriors now, because I think it applies differently for different teams. For the Warriors, I think three draft picks is too expensive. 3 number ones is too expensive because we're kind of in this middle mode where we're trying to like grow and, giving up those picks, we're not going to be able to help him with anyone. And as Curry gets older, it's just Triple J is a really good player. I've wanted him for a long time, but he's not a number one, on a championship team. Maybe he's a number 2, and even on a really good team, he could be considered a number 3. So I thought that was an expensive pick. But for a team like Utah, which there was 2 teams that actually impressed me, was Utah and the Wizards, the way that they handled things. And Utah, I think it's worth giving something up because they got a lot of young players. They got what's his name, the big man there, Welker. He's a good player.
Walker Kessler.
Walker Kessler, right? And they got Laurie Marketing. They got a pretty big team. They've got the template to be pretty decent. So I can see for them this being worth that price. Right. So I actually like it for them. We'll see how this works out. Triple J, my only concern is that both him and Marketing are perimeter players. They don't really like to get into the dirt. So even though they're big, they're kind of outside in type guys, right? They kind of hover more on the outside and then come in only as needed. So we'll see how that works out. But they're a big team. I like it.
Yeah. You have now the emergence of Isaiah Collier, right? Who's
Yep.
now becoming a pretty good point guard. You have Keontae George, who's
Correct.
also emerged as a pretty damn good scoring off guard,
Yep.
kind of a combo guard. Like you already mentioned, they aforementioned Walker Kessler. Now you have Jaren Jackson, and then you also have Kyle Filipowski, who kind of relieves either one of them, right?
Yep.
So it's
got Ace Bailey.
Yeah, Ace Bailey too, right? The newly
Yep.
drafted Ace Bailey. So yeah, it's interesting that they're putting together there over in Utah. But that's the first one that I wanted to point out. The
Yep.
second one that and there's 6 of these trades that I wanted to highlight. So the second one that was like, whoa, was James Harden being dealt for Darius Garland.
That was
so the Clippers got Darius Garland and a second round pick. Excuse me. The Clippers got Darius Garland and a second round pick. James Harden.
Yeah. That
Crazy.
That was crazy, and I don't love this pick for Cleveland. I don't like it. No, I don't like it, Eddie.
I think that makes them really, dude, they're very ball dominant. Okay, both Donovan Mitchell and James Harden are very ball dominant guys.
But let me explain from my perspective why I don't like it.
Please.
Because Cleveland has building a reputation as a team that begins to fold in the playoffs. And who do they pick up? Probably one of the biggest known players to fold in the playoffs, right? And again, this is just more of a psychology. Of course, Harden is not much more, but he's a better scorer even at this age. He's a better option than Garland is at this particular stage. But to me, maybe record-wise, they'll get a little bit better, but I have less faith in them going far in the playoffs than I did prior to this trade.
And since we're on the Cavs topic, they also were very active because they also did a deal, essentially it was a 2-way deal. Yeah, it actually was a deal with the Sacramento Kings and the Bulls, right? So the Kings gave up DeAndre Hunter, and then the Cavs got Keon Ellis, and they also got Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah, so the Cavs lost Keon Hunter, that he went to Sacramento, correct? Yes.
Yeah, DeAndre Hunter and Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder left the Kings to come to the Cavs, and then the Bulls got Dario Saric, and then they also got some second-round picks from the Kings. So there was a 3-team deal to kind of get this going, but I just wanted to bring it up because we talk about Harden, going over there with Donovan Mitchell. Then they got Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder. They have a really good defensive guard in Keon Ellis. And then, Dennis Schroeder, we've seen him on the Warriors. He's actually a very ball dominant guy too, but he can break down defense because he's so freaking fast. So they have four guards now that and then they also have I forgot the guy who played for the Miami Heat, and he hasn't played, and I can see his face, but I forget his name. But he's another guy who hasn't played all season, and so they're building. They have a very guard centric, although they have Jared Allen and Mobley there as the 2 twin towers, and we thought that Jared Allen would be a guy on the move potentially in this trade season as well, but it didn't happen. But this team, we thought that Draymond Green might be a good pick. or a good destination for the Cavs to kind of strengthen them, get them a little bit more, stronger minded, right? But I just wanted to bring up these other trades that happened that the Cavs have. They were looked at as one of the winners in this trade deadline situation.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Schroeder pickup. I like the Keon Ellis pickup. I think those are two pretty decent pickups. I just think, from a talent level, they didn't lose anything with Harden from Garland. But I just think from a postseason perspective, we'll wait and see how that works out. But I think maybe postseason wise, they made themselves a little weaker. That's kind of my.
We shall see. I just think that they're going to be a problem to deal with because you have two guys that can just break down defenses with Harden and Donovan Mitchell, and they have these two screen and roll like beasts in freaking Isaac in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. So I'm thinking of, by the way, Max Strus was the guy I was thinking of.
I hear you on that, Eddie. But who had two great players that could break down defenses were the Brooklyn Nets when they had Kyrie Irving and a younger James Harden, and they still couldn't go anywhere. So to me, you give me a prime Kyrie Irving or a prime Spider Mitchell, I'm taking Kyrie, right? So I think that,
as far as breaking down defenses, yes. Yeah. From the perspective of breaking down defense, you're talking about overall.
Overall, I'd still take
I guess
take Kyrie overall. But to me, that was a better duo, and with not great results. Yeah. And that kind of continues to stem to my, the psychology behind all this. And maybe Harden changes, Barry Bonds changed late in his career. John Elway changed later in his career. It is possible. But right now, that's a big question mark for me.
Yep. So, all right, man. So let's go on to another trade I want to highlight. So this one is just the bane of the Dallas Mavericks existence. Unbelievable what has transpired in a year once we heard about Luka Doncic getting traded to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. Here we are, months later that everything fell apart. Anthony Davis, we knew this guy is a prune. He always gets hurt. He's the Bill Walton of this generation, but as far as, playing time, I'm sure, I don't know what percentage of games he's missed in his career, but it's pretty high. It's not like Bill Walton. Bill Walton was way higher, but this guy is just a walking ailment. This guy's always getting hurt. But the Dallas Mavericks traded Anthony Davis along with Jaden Hardy, D'Angelo Russell, and Dante Exum to the Washington Wizards. And what did the Mavericks get? They got Chris Middleton, AJ Johnson, Malachi Branham, Marvin Bagley, 2 future first-round picks, and 3 future second-round picks. I will tell you this, bro, confidently. If Nico Harrison had not done that deal and they were to go ahead and trade Luka Doncic in the open market, they would have gotten way better than this, dude.
Great.
Way better than this. Here's
the interesting part. If you separate the history, let's ignore how Anthony Davis got to Dallas. Let's ignore that part. This is a pretty good trade for Dallas. If you look at it just on that merit, you're giving up a player and you're getting 2 first-round injured. I think that's a pretty decent pickup for Dallas. But of course, when you pair it with how he got there, then of course that's where it's just like, be done with it. Like get away from it. But I think for Washington's perspective, again, another team like Utah has a lot of young pieces, has some draft picks. They can give up some draft picks because at some point they're going to have to start depending on the players they drafted already. Right. And so to me, I think if they got Trae Young now, they got Anthony Davis now, so I think they've got at least some pieces that if Davis can stay healthy, they got something. They got a little something and could move the needle.
Yeah. So
the thing that really weirded me out though was I didn't really understand how you're going to give up on Davis and not really try to trade Kyrie. I don't understand that part.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think the Kyrie injury, maybe they wouldn't get as much as they would hope because of that injury that he has. It's
maybe
the reason.
Maybe
it's probably the reason. He's not as they're going to get dimes on the dollar with on the open market for Kyrie Irving. Because he hasn't played in a year, right?
Yeah,
and he's getting older too. So, all right, bro, the next trade. So just 3 more trades I want to cover on this, and then we'll go to the sneaky moves. And I'm not going to cover all of them because it's going to take too long. There's 22 trades. But okay, so the next one that I thought was a headline move was Nikola Vucevic being dealt to Boston along with a 2nd-round pick. And the Bulls received Anthony Simons, who's playing tonight, and he actually was doing all right. And then he also had a future 2nd-round pick, a future 2nd-round pick. So that was the deal. Nikola Vucevic and and for Anthony Simons, it's such as what it comes down to. I mean, Anthony Simons is a younger player. Nikola Vucevic is an older player, but Nikola Vucevic is a serviceable big. He's kind of like Kristaps Porzingis without the height because he's an outside shooting guy, but doesn't have the defense like Kristaps Porzingis. But he's probably a better low post overall player, than Kristaps. Although Kristaps has that too, but Kristaps has the availability issue, right? He just
Right.
gets hurt a lot. Whereas this guy's pretty much always playing, Nikola Vucevic. So I thought that was an interesting move. What are your thoughts on that move, bro?
Yeah, I think that pick. I mean, Anthony Simon came to Boston when they traded Drew Holiday over to Portland. That was part of that trade package.
Yep.
So in
Right.
essence, traded Drew Holiday for Vucevic, which is a big. They did lose their big guy. I forget his name. He's over in San Antonio now. Their big man. What's
Wait, who are you talking about?
who's the backup big man in San Antonio?
Luke Cornett.
Cornett. So they lost
Yes.
Cornett. Now they got Vucevic. They've got the young big man that's been playing really well over in Boston. So that's been
Talking about Neemias Queta.
Neemias Queta. Yeah. So that's been working out. So I mean, I think Boston surprised me this year, to be honest with you. I mean,
Yeah,
I
they're
didn't think
surprising
they'd be
everybody.
as good as they were going to be. So I give them kudos. And yeah, that's a sneaky trade. And Vucevic is the kind of player that if you're bringing him off the bench or you need some minutes, to fill as a big, he's going to be able to do that for you. And I thought it's a sneaky pick, and I think it's a good pick.
I would probably say he probably is going to start. Honestly, I think. I don't know if he's going to
He'll
come off the
start.
bench. I think he'll start. Yeah, because
Right.
he's just more versatile than Neemias Queta. Neemias Queta is more of like a kind of a dirty work kind of center, whereas this guy's can shoot the ball outside and spread the
Yep.
floor. Kind of like what Al Horford could do.
Yep.
With a lot younger because he's a floor spreader, and that's what the Boston Celtics pretty much they're one of the highest volume 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. So, and that's what they were last year, and they still kind of do that to this year, but probably not at the same rate. So Nikola Vucevic will bring them back to that. And
Yeah.
then we all know that Jason Tatum is on the horizons. The Boston Celtics, they're going to be an interesting team next
Are
season,
gonna be
this season as well. All right, bro. So the next trade, and then we'll go ahead and I just want to get your sneaky moves after that. So Pacers, dude, this one really surprised me. Ivica Zubac.
Yeah.
That's another center that I was eyeing for the Warriors. But what's really interesting, bro, is that the Clippers have gone 17-4 over the last 21 games. Yeah, they dug a big hole, but dude, they got rid of Harden. They got rid of Ivica Zubac, and you can argue those two guys, they're part of the core with Harden, Kawhi Leonard and Zubac. That's a pretty. I mean, they're old as far as the two of the three, but that surprised me, man. So Ivica Zubac got traded to the Pacers, and along with Kobe Brown from the Clippers, and the Clippers received Benedict Mathurin, Isaiah Jackson, and 2 first-round and a future second-round pick. This was a very interesting move. It's pretty evident that the Pacers are not going anywhere this season, because Tyrese Halliburton has been hurt. And it's incredible how much his absence created this complete void for that team, along with Miles Turner, of course. But, this kind of fills that void of Miles Turner, although he's not the same kind of player. He's kind of like one of the
No, but he will fill
players.
that hole, and we could argue maybe even better than Turner.
From a defensive standpoint, he's right up there with him, with Miles Turner. But Miles Turner can shoot the ball, and this guy's more of a down low kind of, a center, but he does all the dirty work very, very well.
Yeah.
So any parting shots on that one?
No, I like that pick. I like, as you mentioned, when Halliburton gets back, they're going to have a pretty sound team. Mathurin was one of their defensive guards, that I know you liked from a defensive perspective. So they had to give that up. But I think it's a sneaky pickup. It's a good pickup. It's one as a Warriors fan that I'm like, I'd rather fuck than Porzingis, That's what it is. But again, the two first-round picks as a Warrior organization is more costly to me than kind of what Indiana's doing, because Indiana's still young. They've got young players. They're growing into it, and they can afford to give up first-round picks. The Warriors can't, because they're just clawing to try to keep who they got. That's a very high cost for the Warriors organization, and similar teams, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, and the last one in this group, all right, and then I'm going to open up to sneaky moves from your perspective. So the last one, as far as the headlines, you can argue this is not necessarily a headline because of the players involved, only because of the organizations or the organization involved, and that's our organization. So the Warriors did a trade because they couldn't get Giannis Antetokounmpo, so they kept all of their draft capital, which is a good thing, right? So when it was announced, I was thinking, this is interesting because this is an expiring contract, I wonder if there's another deal that's going to happen before the trade deadline, expired.
Right.
It didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, you thought, yeah. So I thought,
Yeah.
So anyway, so the Warriors they received Kristaps Porzingis, and this is now the saying goodbye to Jonathan Kuminga, who essentially had a pretty turbulent a time here on the Warriors. Very very talented athletic player who just didn't fit in the system of Steve Kerr. He was asked to do a lot of things that wasn't really natural for him. He's a scorer first, and that's his mentality. And I think didn't want to conform to the system. He was pretty hard headed and wanted to do what he did his way or the highway. And Kerr was the same way. And they had an impasse, and he wasn't playing that much. And now he's going to the Atlanta Hawks along with Buddy Hield, and we're going to see what's going to happen here. In my opinion, bro, I think that's a great destination for him, man. A great destination. I think that he's going to flourish big time, man. I think he's gonna kick ass there. That's my call. But yeah, Quinn Snyder, who's their coach, probably more of a developmental coach than Steve Kerr as far as developing players, right? So I didn't like this move for the Warriors only because Kristaps Porzingis always is hurt. But if he wasn't hurt, I like this trade. But he's always hurt, and he's got this POTS issue, this neurological issue where his heart gets affected, and there's no cure for it, but it can be managed. And he's dealing with an Achilles, tendonitis issue right now. So he's supposed to be coming back here in the next 1 to 2 weeks. So we're probably going to see him for maybe the last 26, 27 games roughly, and see what happens. If they like what they see, they'll re-sign him. If not, then he's an expiring contract, and away, they'll sign somebody else. So what are your thoughts, bro?
So my thoughts is I have a little bit of a different perspective on how Kuminga is going to do over in Atlanta. And it's simply Atlanta doesn't have a lot of shooters, not a lot of true shooters.
Yeah, but they got Buddy Hield now, bro.
Come on, Eddie. Come on now. Come on now. My biggest concern for Kuminga is that teams are going to crowd the lane when they play the Atlanta Hawks just because they're not great shooting team. And when you take the lane away from Kuminga, he really suffers. He's not a great dribbler. He's more of a, like a streaker type of runner that can attack the hoop as long as it's mostly in the air. And I think that he's going to have a challenging time, as well as there's other players on that team that play similar to him, maybe not as athletic as him, but in a similar way. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out. I'm curious how much he plays. I'm curious how he does in his style of play. I'm curious to see if he rebounds more or does some of the other things that the Warriors are.
I think he might. I think he might. I think he might.
Yeah. So I am curious, but if I had to bet $1, I'd say that the system's he's gonna struggle in that system just based on the fact that they don't have a lot of players that can spread the floor. When he needs a floor spread in order to maximize his talent.
I think Kuminga. This is just me, my opinion, just what I've seen, reading the tea leaves about his personality. I think this guy is one of the types. He's a hard-headed, strong-minded kid, and I think that he's the type that says, "Tell me how to do it and how to do it. I'll do it whenever I feel like it." And he's kind of like rebellious, maybe like one of these types that didn't want to, kind of show that he was listening to Kerr, in what he did, right? So he's actually going to showcase what he learned elsewhere.
Okay, all right. Well, if you're right, then I would be upset because then I'll be like, why couldn't you just do that?
I know, but that's. I'm just telling you. I just have a feeling this is going to happen.
Yeah,
I have a feeling that he's this personality type that is that way. So
yeah. Right, but if he continues to play in the same way, I think he's going to struggle in Atlanta.
Yes,
until they get some more.
Yeah, I'm calling. He's going to do very well there, bro. That's my call.
Okay,
all right,
cool.
And of course, this is the optimist in me. You're the more pessimist guy. Right?
Yeah,
our style, bro. Right.
This is usually.
All right, bro. All right, so let's go into the sneaky trades. I want to get your picks as far as the ones in your opinion that stood out from sneaky standpoint. There's about 5 of them that I have listed here that were sneaky. I kind of want to see if any of these 5 are the same ones that you would go ahead. So, we didn't rehearse any of this stuff, so that's why I kind of want to see what you're thinking.
So sneaky number 1, and it's not a high impact, is Ivy going to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah. Wait, no. Jared McCain.
Sorry, Jared McCain. Sorry.
Jared McCain.
And going to the Oklahoma City.
That was one of mine too.
That is, to me, has the rich getting richer written all freaking over it. McCain last year had a really good start. He was carrying the team for a while. Then he got hurt, and he wasn't playing all that well. If I recall right, McCain is the one that plays for the Sixers, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So he was doing really well, and then he got hurt.
He got hurt.
And then they picked up Edgecombe, and they picked up a couple things, and he kind of fell kind of lower in the rotation. To me, I think that was a sneaky pickup because they didn't give up a whole lot.
So the 2026 first round pick and 3 future second round picks.
Yeah, which to me isn't a whole lot considering he was a first round pick. So really you're giving up 3 second round picks in kind of my own funny math. But I thought that was a sneaky pick. And if he pans out, because I think the Thunder understand, like if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the Thunder understand that they're not going to be able to pay all these guys.
Yeah.
Everything that they want. So they're working on a rotation. They got one of those, like at the fancy hotels where they just kind of go around and around, those rotating doors, and then they're just picking these people up to make everything go longer. And I think he could be one of those pieces, if not maybe even a keeps. They're gonna pay Shea Gilgeous, they've already gonna pay Chet Holmgren. So they got a couple of pieces that they're gonna, have to pay.
Jalen Williams too.
Correct. But players like Lou Dort, Wiggins, some of these players, they're gonna have to cut loose because they're just not
Peyton
gonna
Wallace. Isaiah Joe.
Correct.
Isaiah Hartenstein.
Exactly. Yeah. So out goes Dort, in comes McCain, kind of, and here we go. There's going to be a rotation, and I thought that was a sneaky good move for them.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Sixers gave up on McCain that quickly.
Yes.
That was interesting because, like I said, he showed out pretty well early on. Then he got injured, and it took a while for him to come back from the injury. I forgot what the injury that he had, but then, Edgecombe essentially became this beast of a freaking player, right?
Yep.
And I guess they probably thought, yeah, let's see what we get for him, and let's give him to the team that's the richest. What the hell? And we'll get some picks back, right? So anyway, all right, bro. So any other ones that stand out to you?
One that I turned out to be sneaky, and it wasn't when I first saw it, was I think the Trae Young pick was a sneaky.
Oh, the very first.
The very first.
DJ McCollum and Trae Young.
Exactly. At first, I'm thinking, but now as everything's kind of falling in place, I'm thinking, that was probably a sneaky good move to kind of get everything going. It's obviously a little outside of the window, but I thought that sneaky in the sense, like, you kind of took advantage and jumped the gun and made this move before everything else started happening. And you kind of got your pieces in place. And when I say sneaky, I'm talking about from the Washington Wizards perspective. I think it was a good pickup for them because they're trying to change the direction of their organization.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and CJ McCollum can't shoot the ball, although he's the only one that can really shoot consistently in Atlanta, because you brought up that point that they don't really have a good shooting team. He's the only one that can shoot consistently. Everybody else is kind of streaky. You have Jalen Johnson, who's streaky. You have Dyson Daniels, who's really streaky. Then you have Onyeka Okongwu, who's a center who doesn't really shoot. He can't shoot it, but they don't have like a consistent outside shot.
And I am, part of me was wondering if Atlanta was going to try and trade Sarche, just because of the kind of the like players that they have.
Yes.
I thought about that as well. It didn't happen. He's an interesting piece to see what happens here in the next, during the offseason.
Yep. Yeah. All right, bro. So I'm going to give you one of mine. All right. Okay. There's 2 of them that I thought were really sneaky.
Okay.
First one, dude, this is a guy I thought the Warriors should go after. So the Bulls were very, very active, and they gave up somebody who's a very defensive mind, kind of like on the Keon Ellis kind of, school of defense, and that's Ayo Dosunmu. Yeah. Ayo Dosunmu went to the Wolves. So the Wolves got Ayo Dosunmu and Julian Phillips. Julian Phillips wasn't really playing that much, but the Bulls received your boy, Rob Dillingham.
Yes.
They received Rob Dillingham, Leonard Miller, and 4 second-round picks. I think this is a sneaky move for the Wolves because that Ayo Dosunmu is actually, I think he's gonna do very well there. He's kind of like in the mold of a Jaden McDaniels. Not the same kind of player, but in the mold of him. Okay. So like he's a defensive, kind of really strong defensive player who can shoot, not consistently, but defensively on ball, really good defender, just like Jaden McDaniels is. So that's why I'm thinking that's a very sneaky one. And the second one I'm going to say,
I like what you're saying here because Minnesota was at their best when they were playing very good defense. They were the best, and this goes in that direction. So I just wanted to echo what you're saying.
Yeah. All right. So the next one that I thought was really sneaky, very underrated sneaky move here. The Knicks got Jose Alvarado, Grand Theft Alvarado. All right. And in exchange the Pelicans got Dalen Terry, who was actually traded previously. So they got him from the Bulls essentially, and 2 second-round picks and some cash. So Jose Alvarado, he's a good defensive kind of minded guy, kind of on the, he's kind of, the Knicks have they have the market on the small guards, right? They have Jalen Brunson, and now they have this guy, this guy backing up.
He's a pain in the ass, dude. He's just
But he is. That's why they call him Grand Theft Alvarado, right?
Yeah.
He's just a pain in the ass. He's a Puertorriqueño too.
Yeah.
So we gotta support the Latinos in there, man. So those are the ones that, in my opinion, really stood out as the sneaky moves. And there's a couple other ones that happened with Kevin Huerter and Dario Saric. They were dealt to the Pistons. Kevin Huerter brings some outside shooting, and then the Bulls were just a very active team, right? So the Bulls got Jaden Ivey, and then also got Mike Conley, and then the other one I'll point out here is Kobe White, and the Charlotte Hornets got Kobe White from the Bulls, and they also got Mike Conley because Mike Conley was also traded previously, and then the Bulls received Colin Sexton, Ousmane Dieng from the Thunder, by the way, and 3 future second-round picks. So. All right, brother. So I know
it's not a sneaky move, but one player that got traded that would have garnished at least a little interest from me was Nick Richards. Phoenix traded Nick Richards.
Oh yeah, that's right. So I put that in the just noise category.
Whenever you got a big that can
big,
you always kind of want to pay a little more attention to that. But no, it is just
So there's a bunch of here, bro. I mean, these are kind of the ones that are just kind of like. Whatever, right? I mean, Nick Richards was one of them that you brought out, right? And the Suns got Cole Anthony and Amir Coffey in exchange for that, right? So the Bucks got Nick Richards. There are other ones out here that I'll just pick some of the other ones. So the other one that was interesting is the DeAndre Hunter. We had talked about that one already. The Kings got DeAndre Hunter, and then the Cavs got Keon Ellis and so forth. We already talked about that. The Chris Paul got traded. Right, he got traded to the Raptors. So it's gonna be interesting to see what's going to happen with Chris Paul. I think they're just probably going to release him, and but we'll see. We'll see what they do with him. Lonzo Ball also got traded to the Jazz, but there's talk that they're probably just going to go ahead and waive him. Right, so that's too bad that Lonzo Ball's career might be coming to an end. But we'll see. I think I think there's someone's going to pick him up off of waivers, and there's a bunch of other ones here that
Tyus Jones got signed by the
Mavs, right? So there's a lot of ones here, and none of them really. Luke Kennard, right, to the Lakers. So that was kind of interesting for Gabe Vincent. Luke Kennard is probably a better outside shooter than Gabe Vincent. So and then of course the Trace Jackson Davis, to the Raptors, right? So that's another one. The Warriors got a 2nd-round pick. So these are a bunch of trades that were just a bunch of noise here. But if I were to go ahead and just look at all the teams here that were really active, these are the 3 teams that were very active.
Yes.
The Bulls, the Jazz, and the Cavs. In your opinion, how would you rank these as far as the winners in this trade deadline? How would you rank these these 3?
Jazz, Bulls, Cavs in that order.
Jazz, Bulls, and Cavs as far as
that's
wow. Okay.
Yeah. I think
I would
go ahead. How would you have it?
Yeah, I would probably put the Cavs first. Then I would probably put the Jazz second. Now the Bulls, dude, look at this list. Okay, look at this list. These are the players. This is what they got. Okay,
yeah,
they got Anthony Simons, Colin Sexton, Ousmane Dieng, Jaden Ivey, Dario Saric, Rob Dillingham, Leonard Miller, Gabe Vincent.
That's a lot of cards, bro. That's a lot.
That's a lot, dude. All right, they got a 2nd-round pick in 2027. A 2nd-round pick in 2029. They have 4 2nd-round picks in addition to the ones I just mentioned, and they have another 2032 2nd-round pick from the Lakers.
Yeah.
Okay, they got all that.
Yeah.
And what left? Nikola Vucevic, Kevin Huerter, Kobe White, Mike Conley, Ayo Dosunmu, Julian Phillips, and Luke Kennard. You can argue that they did pretty well themselves too, man. Right?
Yeah.
Because they stockpiled a bunch of young guys. They're not necessarily difference makers, but they got a lot of picks.
No, they did. And to me, they decided we're not going anywhere. We got and they that's why I would put them second. The reason I put Jazz is because I think the Jazz
they're building something. They're building something now.
Yeah, they're building something. And to me, the Cavs really the reason they're third is primarily because I'm not, I don't know how much Harden's going to help in the long term. Right? I think he'll help with regular season wins, but I think to me, I've kind of ranked them on number 1, the Jazz. I think that they're going to have the most significant impact in the win-loss column. I think they're gonna if they out, they'll be the most, they'll get the most improvement. The Bulls, I picked them second because they did the most to kind of change the path that they were on. Right, they had a future Vucevic we were trying to get last year, for Kuminga, I think, and that didn't come through,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So I think they did the most. And then Cleveland, I don't know how much more I would like in the postseason Harden over Garland. I just don't know. To me, I'm not 100% sure. Regular season, yes.
A much more dangerous team, in my opinion, dude. This is my call. I think
Yeah.
that this makes them way more dangerous. They did lose a DeAndre Hunter, but they got, Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis in exchange for that.
Yeah.
So
I like the Schroeder. I like the
yeah. So anyway, so I have it as the Cavs, the Jazz, and then the Bulls. You have it as the Jazz, Bulls, and Cavs. Is that how you had it?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Jazz,
Cool.
Bulls, and Cavs.
Right on, bro.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man,
right on.
Dude, we did we essentially covered almost 22 trades in this session. We spent a lot of time on the Giannis and Ja Morant, and rightfully so, because those were the two that were actually dominating the airways initially. And then, once the first trade happened, oh my God, with Jaren Jackson, actually it was Trae Young, actually. CJ McCollum was the very first trade. But then, the one leading up to the trade deadline, that one was the one that whoa, that really should. And then Anthony Davis was the other one, James Harden. And we know we highlighted some of the noteworthy ones, right? Then we went ahead into the sneaky ones. We talked about that, and then the just noise that we just categorized this, man. But I thought this was a very interesting offseason. Of course, for the Warriors, it wasn't as successful as we would hope. There's definitely Giannis would have been interesting on the Warriors, but then more in the future, like we would have had to do that.
Yeah.
Then I don't know, bro. I think the Warriors are in a good position because next season, you're looking at, of course, it's possible they might shut down Curry, bro. They might shut him down, right? They might shut him down. It's possible, right? And if they do, then they're playing for next year. You have Curry, you have Butler, you have Green, you have Porzingis, then you have this core of young guys, Podziemski, Moody, DeSantos. They're more than likely going to keep DeAnthony Melton now too. They're probably going to resign him, right? Yep. So they're looking at next year right now. This is their last dance. No, almost the last dance. This is now the last dance.
I agree. From a Warriors perspective, they really need to start identifying players that can create their own offense, whether that's through shooting or through attacking the hoop. But they really, because that Sixer game, dude, that thing was freaking brutal. It felt like the last game against Minnesota, where they just come and, they take 24 seconds to try to figure out where they're going to shoot. They don't shoot. It's a shot clock violation. You're like, this is horrendous. You guys can't score to save your lives.
It's brutal, man.
And that really, really needs to change,
Yep. I agree, bro. But hey, we went ahead and did it. Again, this is Buzzer Beaters. We are brought to you by grumblingsmedia.com. Tune in every week. We're going to be on wherever you can find your podcast. You'll find us. I'm Eddie Aparicio. This is Anthony, Toine, Corral. And we're going to go ahead and sign off and have a good rest of the week, everyone. Take care, everyone.
Hey everybody, this is William Del Pilar, founder of Grumblings Media, and I want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our all-volunteer efforts at Grumblings Media, smash the subscribe button right here. 100% free, and please consume and share our great content. Click either one of these two boxes for more of our work.